And hello again, and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, rally our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina, along with Paul Crowley.
Hey, Joe.
Always a pleasure having you here.
Same here. Good to see you again. You're looking well, feeling good?
A little bit, but I'm not 173 like you, and it troubles me, but I'll get there.
All right.
Stay after I'm working at it. Yeah. Both you and I, folks, there's an adage out there that says good guys finish last. But there was a good guy, even though he passed away, would never finish last. He's just a sweetheart of a human being. And we hear it, how do I say it now? Lynn TV?
Lynn Community Television.
Yeah, because
Frankly Speaking.
Yeah, exactly, right. You were there, and I was there, and these are things I don't like to go to. So would like to, Paul, say a few words about Arthur Pileski.
Pay homage to Arthur Pileski. I didn't know Arthur personally, but I knew his son very well, Ed, and I met his brother Jeffrey yesterday morning, and great family. You can tell that they came from good stock, and geez, you look at Arthur's obituary, reads like a resume. He was involved in everything civically. I noticed he was also former attorney for the Lynn Water and Sewer Commission, and you know a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got him. I made sure that he got the 3 votes to be there, and I'm going to explain why that happened.
Okay,
folks, this goes to show you about life has its funny little ways. I had some property in Swampscott, and when I went to sell it, to move back with my dad, who was ill at the time, over to my, one of these Italian situations, we have 2.5 families and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And when I went to sell my property, lo and behold, Arthur represented the buyer at the closing. Now, normally closings are automatic, they're half an hour, whatever, no big deal. This was an 8-hour special. And I was getting madder and madder because what it was is that I was getting slapped for a $4,000 easement because Swampscott at that time was septic, where I was at. And they were bringing in a sewer system that I had absolutely got no benefit from, that I was being charged $4,000, and they made me pay for, and Arthur fought tooth and nail for his client. I vowed that if I ever had the opportunity to get even with him, my Sicilianness, I was going to do it. Lo and behold, here I have the power on the Lynn Water Sewer Commission as the chairman of that board.
And you wanted him doing the same thing for the Lynn Water and Sewer that he did for his client.
Exactly right. Yeah. I thought about it, and I said, if this guy fought me tooth and nail, right, what's he going to do in the Lynn Water Sewer? And he did exactly that. He was a man of integrity, a man of honor, and just really a sweetheart of a human being. And to all of you folks out there who knew Arthur, I'm sure you feel the same. Paul, hum. You know about hum? This is a new addition to our always evolving show. Pedro, get that hum up there. Have you ever noticed, Paul, that whenever you hear the phrase Greater Lynn, the emphasis is on Greater and really on Lynn? Now, you're an exception, Paul.
I'm having a hard time with this one, and I'd love to hear your argument for when the emphasis is on Greater and really on Lynn, because as the Chief Executive Officer for Greater Lynn Senior Services, I can tell you most assuredly that the greater emphasis is on Lynn because that's where the need is greatest.
But you're an exception, Paul. You live in Lynn, do you not?
Yep.
Okay. You educated your daughter in Lynn?
Yep.
Okay. How about those folks that represent Greater Lynn, that send their kids to school systems in Greater Lynn, which is not Lynn?
Well, so
how about when they have fundraisers in Greater Lynn?
So what you're talking about is not Lynn at all. What you're saying is people come from outside the city to support the interests of the city, and then they go back to their home.
Allegedly support the interests. Right. Allegedly, Paul. I'm saying that, for example, I'll give you a good example. Why is it that the paper of record, most of the principals don't live in Lynn, right?
They would have nothing to do with Lynn. The only reason they come to Lynn is they make money off of Lynn. And you're talking about the Lynn item. the daily item.
I'm talking about the newspaper of note in the city of Lynn. Call it what you want to call
Yeah,
it.
the daily item.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Well, I'm asking you, do the principals live in Lynn?
No, and the only thing they care about, Lynn, is extracting money from it.
But do they live in? They live in Greater Lynn. They use that phrase Greater Lynn. The associations that they make are always with the adjective greater. You know, it's like you're slapping on there. Is it about Lynn? No, it's not about Lynn. The best interest of Lynn at heart? I don't think so.
Right.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Right. They took Lynn out of the name of the paper too, by the way. Remember, it used to be called the Lynn Daily Evening Item.
Never thought of that.
Now
That proves my
now
point.
it's a daily item, and there's always a headline about Malden. And I mean, I
You're
didn't
talking
have
about Greater Lynn. That's part of Greater Lynn.
You hear about Malden, Peabody, Saugus.
So?
Now, Swampscott and Nahant has always been kind of, they're almost like wards 8 and 9, you know, if you think about Swampscott and Nahant.
Isn't that the representative from West Lynn has Nahant under their umbrella? There are portions of Lynn that fall under the Swampscott state rep. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, people in Swampscott watch the show.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
Swampscott and Nahant.
Yep.
Used to be Saugus. Now, it wasn't part of Saugus in Ward 1, or a couple of precincts up there?
2 precincts from Ward 1 are part of
the Saugus.
Donald Wong's district. Right.
Okay. My argument, and folks out here, if you disagree with me, by all means, you know,
There
tell me why.
is one state rep who is exclusively Lynn, though.
Yeah,
Dan Cahill.
that's right.
Yeah.
It was formerly Bobby Fennell.
Right.
Folks, by the way, let me tell you this. Begrudgingly, I had a pony up. I didn't like the idea. I happened to go with Paul at 173 pounds to the Capitol Diner for 2 Sundays in a row. This trip, I picked up the tab, which broke my heart. And, you know, I have to tell you, Bobby Fennell is there every single week with a shirt and a tie. He's been flipping eggs there for as long as I can remember. And you got to give him credit. He's a Lynn guy.
He is a Lynn
He never
guy.
aspired to be anything but a Lynn guy. That's where I have a problem. And I got so many people coming. Echo. Talk about Greater Lynn. Echo. Isn't that Essex County?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
And
they come into the city of Lynn. They stage a resistance, which is what they're all about.
Right.
A resistance to who?
They come here looking for
Trouble.
The people to antagonize, to get them ginned up so that they can respond to whatever the bugaboo of the day, if you will. To me, I actually talked to a friend of mine who was a former community organizer from the early 80s.
Yeah.
And he talks about it doesn't matter what it is. The what doesn't matter for these people.
But Paul,
all they do is want to get everybody worked up and pushing back.
Oh, and yet you were telling me before the show about an editorial that you saw where this young lady, or I don't know if she's young, but this in the item is talking about why can't we all get along, right?
That's actually, it was in the Globe, but yeah.
Yeah, why can't we all get along?
Yeah.
And you're telling me
Stop
they
the
don't want to
madness.
get along. Does Echo want to get along?
No. So Stop the Madness is the name of the article. If you folks have a chance to read it, it's the opinion in the Boston Globe, and to me it was refreshing to see somebody actually speaking not about either side, but about how, in effect, and this is the way I feel very strongly about this, that there are, there are good parts of, just like there are bad parts of each party and each attitude, there are good parts too, and if we would just look for the good in both parties, we could probably come up with some pretty good ideas on what direction to take this country.
But Paul,
but that will never happen.
That's not in the interest of these groups. Folks, I'm going to get to Frankly Joe, and then we'll get to Frankly Paul, okay?
Okay.
Because, and then we're going to get into a real good history lesson. Folks, get your pen and pencils out because we got a pretty good show lined up for you. Frankly Joe, if you're not outraged, and this comes from a front page story in the item, right? The title of it was Taking a Stand. And it said, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. So I say, really? Well, I'm paying attention, Paul, and I'm outraged.
Outraged about what?
Well, let me get to it.
All right.
Let me read it.
All right.
Well, I'm paying attention, and I'm outraged. Well, I'm paying attention, and I'm taking a stand, Paul. I'm outraged that the item gave voice to radical groups who spew hatred in the guise of peaceful protests. I'm outraged that the leaders of ECHO, Lynn United for Change, and the new Lynn Coalition jointly jointly asserted that Trump supports violent racism. How so, Paul? How can you make that charge? I'm outraged that these far-left leaders demanded an explanation from Mayor Judith Kenney for what? For going to the inauguration as you and I did, and all of a sudden by extrapolation we're racist and violent racist? Is that what they're trying to say, Paul?
I think so.
And they want her to respond to the fact that she went down to Washington, D.C. to the inauguration. She happens to be a Republican. Folks, she's a Republican.
To support our president.
Yeah. I'm outraged that the item never once is demanding an explanation for Tommy McGee for showing up at ECHO events and ECHO affairs and speaking at them and supporting them. And frankly, they're problematic.
They're causing all the trouble, those kind of groups.
Yeah. And I'm also outraged.
By the way, can I just point out
let
that...
me finish,
okay,
Paul.
Okay, all right.
I'm outraged at the item.
You are outraged.
No, but seriously,
Boy, yeah,
because I'm very passionate about this. I'm outraged at the item for constantly interjecting partisanship into a nonpartisan election in an attempt, and it's not even a veiled attempt, to tip the scale.
Right. They're not interested in reporting the facts. They want Tommy McGee to win.
And I'm outraged, and I'm taking a stand, folks. And that's the way it is. Now, Paul, anything you want to say, you can.
Well, I just wanted to point out that, to me, this whole thing started with down in Carolina, with what was it, Charlottesville, where the hate groups started out there, and then and all the people came in, the Antifa, whatever it's called. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that I support or am opposed to any groups at all. All I want to say is one very important thing, and that is giving voice to those fascists is what happened here. The only thing that happened, these folks have been doing this stuff for years and years and years, where they come out and they spew their hatred, but nobody paid attention to them. And now all of a sudden...
But wait a minute, Paul. People are actually looking the other way for Black Lives Matter. They're looking the other way for these radical groups that throw urine bubbles at policemen who have no respect for law and order.
I get that.
And they never mention that.
Right, but what I'm getting at is, let them cry in the wilderness. If nobody's hearing them, they're not going to... I mean, the media and the Antifa all went down there, not to oppose them. They went down there to connect them to Donald Trump. That's the only reason they went down there.
And and you tell me why the item has been running series left and right on racism.
Because they want to connect anybody who disagrees with them to racism.
But let me ask you something. You and I both grew up in the city of Lynn that's had many diverse ethnic groups and had some economic and social clashes, no question, right?
Yep.
But do you think that we're better off today than we were when you and I were kids? I can tell you, I'm a little older than you, that my grandkids are far, far more tolerant and understanding and socially diverse as you could ever want to be.
Yeah, right. And I think that's...
Is that a good thing?
What was that feminist expression they had back in the 70s? We've come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
You know, we really have. I mean, I think that, and we still have further to go.
But what we're trying to do is groups that are going to try to litigate, is that the word? Relitigate that which has already been accomplished? Paul, I hate to tell you, your ancestors didn't own slaves.
Right.
Nor did mine.
Right.
Okay. And I'm not an apologist.
And if Barack Obama could in 2006 have the acceptable point of view that marriage was between a man and a woman, and then change it in 2014, you have to make the argument that as a society we had the right to transition away from a tolerance towards slavery to an intolerance towards racism, which is where we are today. What do you think?
By and large, I think we've crossed that bridge.
Yeah.
Resurrecting it again and pitting the races against each other is a phenomenon of the last decade, Paul.
Yep.
It was always moving in a right direction. And I was around when I heard the guy say this. He said, "I want to be judged by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. I heard that loud and clear. I was a young puppy then with a young kids, and that was a refreshing thing to hear.
How profound it is, even to this day. But to your point, the echoes of the world and what I would call the grievance people, the ones who are the grievance merchants, they're out there trying to get people.
Well, they don't like you because you're a white man. White supremacy. When did you hear this term? When all of a sudden is being white such a bad thing? I mean, and the narrative, the media is pushing this narrative.
Right.
And I'm simply saying,
run by white
this
people,
is what
by
I'm
the way.
standing up for.
They're all run by white people, too.
Amazing.
But see, you know what? Here's the thing that's important, and for you folks at home, just remember this, that most of the noise that you hear from the white media, the white folks that are saying that we need to be more sympathetic to people of color, are the ones that live in gated communities and don't
and send their kids to lily white schools.
In private schools and all that kind of stuff. So they don't practice what they preach at all. So anyway, I think that's an important thing to distinguish. And at the same time, Joe and I grew up and lived here all our lives, except for a short time you were in Swampscott, and while I was in college.
Yeah, I did. I lived in Ohio, and I lived in Michigan. I was a salesman for Johnson & Johnson.
Here.
I chose to come back to Lynn, Paul.
Yeah.
I had a very substantial career with Johnson & Johnson. My parents became ill. They were elderly, and I thought I had a responsibility to my family, so I came back to take care of them, and I'm glad I did.
Yep.
It gave me the opportunity to make peace for being a bad son at times, And speaking of that, let's go to a couple of important proverbs. You've heard it from everywhere. It's a Hebrew expression, and it's also a good Italian proverb, Sicilian, and it goes something like this. The Hebrews say that the fish stinks from the head. And we Sicilians, we say, it's the head, stupid. That's where all the rot begins, right? In other words, the fish rots from the head. Paul, if you think about that, and folks, if you think about that, the tone is set by the organized elite that we're talking about. That's the head of the fish.
Right.
And that's getting rotten, and it permeates all the way down.
Right. Right. And I would agree. I mean, when I just think about some of the stuff that shows up in it's called news, and it's not. I mean, it's gossip at best, and it's slanderous at worst.
Very. And we're going to get, we're going to really get to that because taking that stand and being outraged. I am outraged, folks. I'm outraged that they vilified the mayor of the city of Lynn in a front page article that had nothing to do with her, that had to do with a protest that was taking place at Lynn City Hall over events in Charlottesville, okay?
Right.
And how they extrapolated from that Donald Trump is evil, therefore Judy Kennedy is evil for not saying he's evil.
And that makes you and I evil.
Evil because we went to the inauguration ourselves, right? And I happen to have voted for Trump, so that makes me doubly evil. And that is what troubles me. And yet they don't cut the same type of questions and ask for explanations of guess who? Right. Of anybody or Bernie Sanders. Or you mentioned Barack Obama. I want folks, think about this. Does Barack Obama have any lineage towards slavery? Any part of him part of the slave experience of an African American in this country?
I don't know about his Kenyan roots, but I would say that you made a point once before is that aside from the slavery question, he didn't even grow up in this country really.
No. I mean his mother was Caucasian, right, and his father was a Kenyan. And from the upper class of Kenya.
But they grew up in Hawaii. So
he grew up in Hawaii. But what I'm saying is that he has no his ancestors were not forced to the United States on slave ships.
Right.
So for him to speak about in the same way as Jesse Jackson, for example, you may disagree with him, but Jesse Jackson has lineage to slavery.
Right.
Martin Luther King had lineage to slavery. Barack Obama had no lineage to slavery.
Right. Right. He just grabbed onto it because for him, it was politically expedient, right?
He dumped his white girlfriend because it would be politically, to his disadvantage.
Right.
He specifically wanted to marry, and he says it. It came out, and it's a book coming out right now that speaks to that. In fact, the gal that he was engaged to marry, she was biracial. She was Chinese, Japanese, and Caucasian, but he she didn't fit into his ambition.
Right.
And that goes to show. Paul, frankly, Paul, nearly half a century. Little history, folks.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, so nearly a half a century ago, Governor George Wallace of, was it of Texas? Is he of Texas?
Huh?
Was George Wallace of Texas or Alabama?
Alabama.
Alabama. Ran for president of the United States as a nominee of the American Independent Party. He won 5 states and 46 electoral votes. You know, any time since then, has any national party won any electoral votes? I don't think anybody has ever won.
They have, but it's been few.
Because I know that Ross Perot got 19% of the popular vote, but he didn't get any electoral votes.
He carried 5 states.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's unique all by itself.
Right.
So during the campaign, the governor asserted there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. And while I would say that is expedient to his cause, it's the truth. I stand by that position. That's why I'm unenrolled.
He said this, Paul, in 1968. This
Right.
was when Nixon and Humphrey were running, and he was the third-party candidate
Right.
back then.
No difference between them, right?
Yeah.
So in the election of 2016, Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, talk about a dime's worth of difference,
Yeah.
huh? I mean, so it was one monarch versus another, I guess,
Well,
right?
they were favored to square off against each other. To what? To
Right.
what, Paul?
So Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush were favored to square off against each other to the delight of the establishment. That meant that they couldn't lose, right?
Read the next.
Right.
Read the next one.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
Yeah.
Republican, Democrat made no difference. Neither threatened the status quo, and business as usual was guaranteed.
Would you agree with that?
That's exactly why they despise Trump.
What happened
Neither
next?
threatened the status quo, and business as usual was guaranteed.
But what happened? You have to finish it off.
Then the horrors of horrors. Trump won, and all hell broke loose. Democrats and Republicans alike rushed to fill the ranks of the never Trumpers. George Wallace was right after all. And I just have to say that, you know, while Donald Trump puts his foot in his mouth with an incredible amount of regularity, that's just a good excuse for them to bash him. But the ultimate issue here is that unlike Clinton or Bush, Trump threatens the status quo, and business as usual is no longer guaranteed. So that's what this is all about. And if people would only understand that, I think that they would stop believing the spew that comes out of CNN, that shows up in the daily evening item as news, shows up in the Boston Globe as news, and start thinking about the realities, and get your facts from multiple sources, because we're getting sold a bill of goods every single day.
Paul, we're going to go down a historical journey, okay? And we're going to feature somebody to illustrate points that you and I have been trying to make. Folks, please bear with us. A history lesson. Let's put this fellow up, and it's called the Kingfish. You know the Kingfish? Huey Long. He was born in 1893, Paul, and he died in September of 1935. That's not very long life. He was shot, assassinated.
He was assassinated.
Yeah.
And you don't hear too much about a non-elected president being. He could have been president, though, right?
He was running against FDR.
It was during the election
Yeah.
that he was shot.
1935. It was for the 36 election. He was running it, and FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he said the 2 most dangerous men in America were Huey Long and General Douglas MacArthur.
Right. And I was never aware of these facts. The fact that Huey Long ran against him, and I mean, it's kind of left out of you don't hear much about that in public discourse. You have to really dig to find this information.
They shot him.
Right.
And by the way, FDR stole all his ideas.
Right. So let's talk about those who have been shot.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about him, then we get to all of that stuff.
Okay.
All right, let's get to Whitty. He's shot now, and he's in the hospital dying, and these are the words, his last words. And under Whitty, he said, "God, don't let me die. I have so much to do." He was only 42 at the time.
Right.
Paul, read this down.
Hard work is damn near as overrated as monogamy.
Keep going.
Every man is a king, but no one wears a crown.
That was his thing. Every man's a king. That was his slogan. You know, it was like the Fair Deal, the New Deal.
Right.
He was the guy that captured it. He said, the time has come for all good men to rise against principle. Wouldn't that be nice?
Rise above principle.
Above it, to rise above it. For all good men to rise. You know, people say, well, that's my principle. Well, he's saying, it's a play on words. A lot of people don't do the right thing because they say, I'm principled. Well, sometimes, Paul, being principled is the wrong thing to do. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, you don't believe in surgery, and you need surgery, you know, you better give up your principle in order to survive. You follow my point?
Yep.
Okay, and you'd love the last one, Paul. Why don't you read that one out?
This is beautiful. I love this one. One of these days, the people of Louisiana are going to get good government, and they aren't going to like it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting thing. You know, somebody once said to me, you know, I was frustrated when I got knocked out of the city council, and I was really, you know, taking it hard or whatever, you know, and I was confiding with some friends, and you know, always try to be trustworthy, honest, and do the right thing and so forth. So I figured that would count for something, you know, when you get elected. And when I was saying that to my friend said, that was your problem. They couldn't trust you. They couldn't trust you to do the wrong thing.
That's right. That's right.
Think about that.
Oh, I know that. I got things to think about. You move right into it. Now, this is context, folks, and things to think about. Huey Long was assassinated in September of 1935 before Hitler had consolidated his power and the horrors of the Holocaust had taken place. Here's what Huey Long said, Paul. Why don't you read this for us? Huey said, what did he say?
This is before Hitler.
During Hitler, but before Hitler took over.
Right. Okay. Fascism will come to America in the name of anti-fascism.
Gee, I wonder, isn't that profound?
Isn't that what's going on today?
Exactly.
Antifa.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's what they call themselves.
1930, this is...
Write this down, folks.
Right.
I mean,
now, let me ask you,
is Joe unbelievable, the stuff that he can find out? I mean, this is unbelievable. Fascism will come to America in the name of anti-fascism. And what was that group that went to Charlottesville to protest the fascists?
A-N-T-I-F-A, and they pronounce it Antifa.
Right, which is anti-fascism.
Exactly.
Right. So in the name of anti-fascism, they went down there and they are essentially.
And what did he say? What else did he say about fascism? This is way back in '35, folks.
Well, if fascism ever came to the United States, it would be wrapped in an American flag. And that's interesting because that's what the skinheads and the white supremacists are doing, right? So in both...
Paul, think about this. They don't wrap it in the American flag. They wrap it in a Confederate flag and a Nazi flag. The people who are trying to say they're the Americans are the anti-fascists. They're the ones that are wrapping fascism in an American flag.
But a guy like Donald Trump, very patriotic, he's wrapping everything in the American flag, is he not?
No. That's the irony. The folks that are wrapping the ideology, who are justified, what do they always talk about? These aren't American values. This is not the American way.
Right.
Obama, if he said it one more time, I was going to vomit.
Right.
You know, these aren't our values. This is what America is all about. Blah, blah. And this is what the left says all the time. They're wrapping it all into the flag. The flag is a metaphor.
Okay.
Get me?
Yep, fair enough.
All right. Now, he was a contemporary of Adolf Hitler.
In that they were around at the same time.
At the same time.
Not that they were related or connected or anything like that, right? Okay.
And he was adamant about this. He says, don't liken me to that SOB. Absolutely. That lets his public, or anybody that lets his public policies be mixed with religious prejudice is a plain goddamn fool.
Right.
Now, here's a pretty enlightened guy from supposedly backwood Louisiana who graduated from Tulane, by the way. He was no dummy. So, he understood then that you can't do that. You're an idiot to mix politics and religion, right? And prejudice. And now here's the best one. Listen to this, folks, because I think this is really prophetic. I don't know much about Hitler, and obviously didn't. Hitler came to power really afterwards. You know, he started his rise in '32, but his real power came after the Rhineland, 1936, when he told the troops to go into the Rhineland with the instruction if they resist, get the Christ out of there. Because he knew that the Germany at 1930 was in no position to confront anybody militarily. I don't know much about Hitler except that last thing about Jews. There has never been a country that put its heels down on the Jews that ever lived afterwards. And if you think about that, there's a whole lot of truth to that.
Yeah, it really is. So it's really interesting how prophetic Huey Long is to this whole
Well, we
thing.
haven't finished because we got to mark it down, folks. We're going to mark it down for Huey. Paul, you have to read this because you're going to love it.
All right, I will. Under the mark it down, Monica, so they've got a set of Republican waiters on one side and a set of Democratic waiters on the other side. But no matter which set brings you the dish, the legislative grub is all prepared in the same Wall Street kitchen. This was Kingfish in 1932.
1932.
Right.
Now, you tell me what's different.
Nothing. That's the whole argument, you know.
Well, what did you say about George Wallace a little earlier? The governor of Alabama, what did he say, 1968? He said there's not a dime's worth of difference, right?
Right.
What does Huey Long say in 1932? And what did he say?
The same thing. It doesn't matter which way it brings it. It's going to be the same grub, right?
So, and then again, that took place in 68. And here we are in 2017.
Right.
Could we say the exact same thing?
You can.
Huh? What's changed,
about
Paul?
What's interesting is, so from 32 to 68 was about 38 years, and then from 68 to 17 is about 49 years. So, every 40 to 50 years, we kind of go through this whole cycle,
Yeah,
right?
we start realizing, don't forget, he was at the height of the Depression.
Right.
Okay. Here's what he said, and this is fabulous. I'd rather violate every one of the, you got to say it with a Southern accent, Paul. Let me act it out. I'd rather violate every one of those damn conventions and see my bills passed than sit back in my office all nice and proper and watch them die. Right?
Yeah.
And you know who was like that? Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson
Emulated him.
Of course he did. Of course he did. What about democracy, Paul? What do you have to say about democracy?
A perfect democracy can come close to looking like a dictatorship, a democracy in which the people are so satisfied they have no complaints.
Huh? By the way, folks, talk about fascism. People misunderstand. Fascism is to be attached to Italy, not Germany. Nazism is one thing. Fascism is another. Mussolini was a fascist.
Right.
And that's the combination of the marriage of state and politics, right? And business, rather. So I'm always amazed at people talking about fascism. My siblings were in Italy under Mussolini during those years that we're talking about. They were there from the entire decade of the 30s. They came here 1938 to escape a war that was pending.
Right.
They loved Mussolini. They were in the youth corps, it was like the Eagle Scouts. He drained the swamps. He got the trains running on time. He ended the mafia. So good things happened. Now, we're not saying he's a good guy, but the Italians and Mussolini was not throwing minorities in the oven.
Right.
Okay? He was not rounding up gypsies. What they had in common, what Hitler...
He was rounding up the swamp.
He drained the swamp.
Right.
He seriously did.
Which is
mosquito infested.
Right.
All right, now here's the thing. Here's what people don't realize. The way and the nexus between Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, and folks, don't forget Franco in Spain,
Right.
who was also a fascist at that time, right? Those three folks were there specifically as a counterweight to communism. They were anti-communist.
Right. That's what
Hitler, Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco.
That's how they got their power, by scaring people about the communist threat, right?
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. And we ended up wiping them out. And what happened?
Aligning with the communists.
And they rose.
Yeah.
And they became our arch enemies. And today we talk about Russian collusion. Can you believe it? I mean, history is hilarious. Anyways, I find that you cannot do without politicians. They are necessary evil, Paul. You'd love that one.
Yeah.
And Here's the last one, folks, and then you can mark it down. Go on, Paul.
Always take the offense. The defense ain't worth a damn. That's pretty good.
You gotta love.
Huey Long was great. I'm going to learn. I'm going to read more about him. He was an interesting character. But and I wanted to get back to the point. So, and like I said, I knew of Huey Long. I kind of knew of him as being a populist of his time and so forth.
Yeah.
Didn't know he was assassinated. I didn't know he was assassinated while running against
FDR.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yep.
With his fireside chats.
Yes.
Right. And it just brings to mind, and I've always made this correlation. I am very fearful that there's going to at least be an attempt on Donald Trump's life. I mean, you hear, state senators from Missouri are saying he should be assassinated, things like that. I mean, the talk is different, but so now you got Huey Long shot dead because he represented opposition to the progressive movement, right?
He was a progressive. He was more progressive than the progressives.
But the progressives not in literal
they killed him
terms.
because he was a populist, Paul.
Right, because he was going to get in the way of the establishment, right?
Exactly, of course.
Okay, so let's refer to it as he was an anti-establishment guy. Okay, John F. Kennedy, while he was supported by the establishment candidates, at least in the Democratic Party when he got elected, in my view, his approach, his efforts around civil rights and so forth, led to his assassination.
What led to his assassination more so than that, Paul, is he's the only president up until that time that refused to take money from the Federal Reserve banking system.
Really?
Okay? Oh, yeah. And by the way, JFK, folks, today would be a conservative.
Right. Right.
I mean,
right. So,
he didn't borrow money from the federal government. He was not, everything that he gets credit for vis-a-vis civil rights is because he was assassinated. The guy that activated everything, got it all done, was LBJ.
Right.
Okay? And prior to that, who was the first one to really bring it to the surface? Civil rights.
It was Eisenhower.
Of course.
Right.
Ford versus down in Little Rock, Arkansas, when he sent the troops down to integrate the schools.
Right.
So here you have Eisenhower and Truman, who integrated the armed forces. People don't realize that. The armed forces, World War II, was segregated.
Right.
Truman integrated the armed forces. That was the continuation. This is why you need to know history, folks. Then the progress took place when Eisenhower sent the troops down to Fort Bliss down there in Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was growing up, saying, you can't do this. And I'm sending the National Guard down if you want to, he asserted federal power over states' rights. I mean, in effect, he did what Lincoln did.
Right.
It's the exact same thing, except they didn't go to war.
He felt the
There
circumstances
was no Confederacy.
warranted.
Okay. Now, if you folks out there that love the Democratic Party so much and the Progressive Party, understand that the ones who fought integration were Al Gore's father, Senator Gore from Tennessee, Fulbright from Arkansas, Russell from
Was that guy?
Georgia.
Wasn't a guy named Byrd?
Harold Byrd from West Virginia.
He was like a senator for
Yeah, by the way, they're going to take down his name. He was a certified KKK guy. Are they going to go? You know how many things are named after Byrd in West Virginia?
Well, I've made the argument that if they're going to take down all these statues for anything that was associated with the Confederacy, then they have to eliminate the Democratic Party too, because the Democratic Party was
they were the Dixiecrats.
Right. They were all supportive and in favor of slavery, right?
Of course they were.
Right.
But this is the perversion. People, if you don't know history, and they don't teach history, how do these folks know?
And they keep changing it. And they're whitewashing. They want to tear down statues so people can't say, "Oh, what is this? Who is this guy? Thomas Jefferson?" It seems to be more important that he was a slave owner than it was that he was the second president of the United States, and that he founded University of Virginia, and that he...
The most important thing that he did besides becoming president, and folks, talk about conservative. Don't forget, Jefferson and Hamilton were polar opposites. Right.
He was a states' rights guy.
Hamilton would be a centralist elitist today,
Right.
globalist. And Jefferson was a nationalist.
Yeah, more in the states' rights.
Much more so, right. States' rights guy.
Federalist.
Agricultural society and stuff like that. But what people don't realize about Jefferson is that Jefferson, as president, committed a massive illegal act in which he purchased Louisiana. And you can't do that without the consent of the Senate. A president can't make treaties. He instructed Livingston to buy Louisiana in 1803 from guess who?
French.
And that would be Napoleon, right? So we are a country today, from coast to coast, as a consequence of an illegal act by the President of the United States. So give me a break when people talk about legalities and stuff. You know, last night, and when we taped this, so this 2 nights ago, President of the United States got up there and talked about Afghanistan. And there were so many people vilifying him because he switched positions. So if the Times present a certain situation, Paul, as an executive director of GLIS, something you may not want to do, you have to do because circumstances make you do it, correct?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And that's a good leader.
Right, right. And by the way, we talked about this a little earlier. In 2006, Barack Obama said that marriage was between a man and a woman. In 2013 or 14, whenever it was, he changed his position on that. Now, the media who was in the tank for him said that it was an evolution of an idea.
Say that again? The media was what?
In the tank for Obama.
Really? You really mean that?
I really mean that.
Okay.
Conversely, you got a media who is opposed to everything he does, so they say that he's a flip-flopper, and and that how can you change your position? Look for everything they can find wrong with what he's doing.
For one reason only.
To get rid of him. They want him out. They don't want an outsider running the country because he's in the way.
By Huey Long, and by the way, they shot George Wallace too. He survived.
Right. Right, and then the other one...
They shot Martin Luther King.
Right.
They shot Bobby Kennedy. They shot Ted Kennedy. They shot McKinley. They shot Garfield. You want to go up and down?
Ronald Reagan.
Wait a minute. Well, they missed. They tried to get him. It all started with guess who? Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And, it's funny that we don't talk about these things. People who upset the apple cart create, and they're the real leaders.
Right.
We remember the martyrs. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they nail somebody to a cross?
Right.
Huh? That was 32 years old. He was a martyr, community organizer, by the way.
Right.
Very nice guy. Had great things to say. What did they do to him?
Right.
All right. So, I'm not trying to draw a parallel. So don't get me wrong. I'm not drawing a parallel between any of these assassin people.
Right. But it's fair to say that the mob mentality takes over when somebody rises up and has a different point of view,
Paul, Madame Defarge at the French Revolution stormed the Bastille, right? And they grabbed everybody and anybody, and they carted them over to the guillotine. Bing, 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 bing. Talk about mob violence. You know what they did in the Soviet Union to the royal family? The wonderful, Marxists, communists? Well, they took the royal family, killed them all the kids and everybody else. Well, that wasn't enough, Paul. They chopped them up, and then they burned them. And then they had...
In the public square, too, probably, right?
And they had... What was left was their bones. And they poured acid on the bones so no trace would ever be left. So the barbarism of... this is why I can't understand people who would be in favor of communism or socialism. The genesis of its arrival in Russia was horrific. The French Revolution was horrific. The Marquis de Sade, called sadism. Our revolution was fundamentally peaceful. It was a kid saying to his parents, see you later, I'm going on my own. Basically what it comes down to. Our Civil War was quite dramatic.
Very different, right? Yeah.
That was difficult. We got to do the Riddler, and then a wrap-up.
You got the Riddler today, huh?
We have the Riddler. So let's get that Riddler up there, and you guys can think about it and try to figure out the Riddler. And here he comes. To you, Paul. David's father has 3 sons. Are you listening? Snap, Crackle, and?
David.
Why do you say that? Very smart. Folks, look at, we got to, yeah, you're right, it's David. I'm
That was too easy.
impressed.
That was too easy.
Well, the other ones weren't
David's
that
father,
easy.
so he's one of the sons, right?
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yeah. I'm telling you, you're not head of glitz for no reason. Now, you have two fathers and you have two sons. They went fishing one day. They were there the whole day and caught only 3 fish, Paul. One father said, that's enough for all of us. We'll have 1 each. How's that possible?
Because
Because?
there were really only 3 people there. There were 2 fathers.
2 fathers and 2 sons.
So a father, his 2 kids, and then a grandson.
How about a grandfather, right?
Yeah.
The son and the grandson. So you have
Oh, right, yeah.
2 fathers,
Right.
right? And 2 sons.
Right. Right.
You got it?
Yeah.
So you have 3 people.
Right.
Even though it says 2 and 2.
Right. Yep.
You get awfully quick. Folks, we're going to have a little, because of technical problems, Paul, we have to be up front with our audience,
Yep.
We will not be going live when we thought because there's some technical things that have to be worked out. But we'll keep you posted as to when it's going to happen.
Right. It's still coming. It's just a question of when. And we hope to do it just as quickly as possible because we're dying to get the input from our audience. When we do, it's going to be on Wednesday nights at 5 o'clock.
It is.
Right.
Paul, I want to, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to go down a different place because, and I want to thank you folks out there for great comments and your support. It's really heartfelt. We've had a number of our folks who are loyal, to frankly speaking, who really would like us to monitor and host a debate between the mayoral candidates primarily. And I believe both of us are willing to do that.
Sure.
But in order to force that happening, because, sometimes they're a little leery about this stuff, you people have to let it be known. The other ones have to press the issue, put the pressure on. We'll do it. Now, listen, I'm not going to tell you everybody's got a dog in this race, to some way or another. But on our show, we try to be, I don't want to use the word fair and balanced, we try to be fair.
Equitable.
All right.
Right.
So,
I would never... we have to ask tough questions, though.
Absolutely.
But of both
Of
candidates.
both.
Right.
Of both. I was pondering about a certain thing, and I think that you probably have the same thing. I was thinking about people who I really respect and really like. I have this wonderful girl, Mary Winston McCarriston. She's a great lady. And Billy Demento from Swampscott, who are really active liberals. And I have the greatest respect, and I really like them. And it's funny that some of the people I have the greatest respect and affection for are politically and philosophically.
Right. Well, that's like the 2 Supreme Court justices. It was the one that died, Antonin
Scalia.
Scalia was very good friends with the
Ginsburg.
Ginsburg, yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and politically they're very different people, but they got along famously.
Yeah. So but this is and this is harkening back to what you talked about on the article, Why Can't We Get Along? I love, please take this in the right way, I really care, I shouldn't say it that way, respect, like, whatever, Danny Kael's mom, Jean. And, she's a pretty liberal, thoughtful, decent human being, a really nice lady. And I find many, growing up with, I'm thinking of the friends I grew up with, who, we were polar opposites when it came to the way we saw government and things like that, but very close friends.
Right.
And I think that's like, that balance you talk about happens, the better angels, it kind of sands off those dark edges I have.
As long as the animus towards one another is not part of the conversation, you can have a respectable debate, right?
Yeah.
It's when, see, I've always come to the conclusion that the difficulty in having a debate with somebody who has liberal views, extreme liberal views, is as soon as you beat them in the argument, they go after you. They go after you.
Yeah,
they go after your character. And when that happens, you just can't have a conversation anymore.
Well, Paul, that's my outrage. My outrage is that Echo and the new Lynn Coalition and the other one,
And
that they go,
with the support of the item,
with the support of the item,
right?
they get out there and they vilify, and they put ad hominem attacks that make no sense whatsoever, and they try to indict Mayor Kennedy unfairly, utterly unfairly, and nobody talks about it. That's not what I'm talking about.
Well, we're talking about it, and that's a good thing, right?
Unfortunately. Paul, we're going to go shortly, so you better get whatever you have to say to the folks. The folks
one
need to
last
know.
thing
Yeah.
is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about things that matter.
I kind of like that. On that note, folks, stay tuned. We'll be back next week as usual. Have a great week.